Hello everyone, and welcome back to another devlog recording concerning the Neverland project. And today we are going to cover devlog number 17. There are actually a lot of points to go through today, but this is mostly concerning Emscripten, basically. This could be considered as my first test and trials with this compiler, and also trying to use Qt at the same time, Qt for WebAssembly. And to do that, we will be trying to build a initial application, I would say. This is the same usual application as usual. The CryptoView test app. And for now, we're just going to try to end with the display of the BTC price. So let's see how we have been through all those points. So yeah, first thing obviously was to try to build a very minimal simple with Qt and Emscripten. So I've been preparing for that test application with which I call test Qt WASM. I don't know how you say that. Yes, WASM. This had to be an executable, of course, and at first I was just trying to link to the most important Qt libraries. I don't quite remember how I've discovered that. Okay, let me just change the product, by the way. So let's have a look at the sources maybe for this test application. So that's in the Neverland project test Qt WASM. At first I had only this one, the Qt window application, and this one is designed to build on a desktop actually. So I took this as an example and use that code to try to build the Qt WASM version of it. So it's basically doing the same thing. In fact, I've changed this code in the process. Initially, it was just displaying an empty widget, so this was the initial version of it. And this is what I used first to do the WASM compilation. So to build this project, we started with the list of Qt libraries. These are standard libraries, I guess. The GUI, widgets, core. But then trying to do the compilation, you will eventually realize that you're statically linking to all those libraries, of course. So you need to provide them whole, actually. So took me some time also to figure out that you need to provide those. The bundle, free type, libpng, and so on. Because if you don't provide that, you will get link errors, because there's some of the symbols are loaded from those libraries, and I didn't really know where to get this in Emscripten. I've tried a few things, like trying to specify use free type, I remember, as an Emscripten parameter, because Emscripten can also download some of those libraries and provide them to you directly, but it was not really working because I don't remember. This one, for instance, is not really available out of the box. So yeah, you better just provide all those bundle pre-compiled libraries for Qt. Same thing then for OpenGL, multimedia, WebSocket, and so on. These are required because you will get link errors, I believe. And the thing is, whenever you are using OpenGL or not in your application, you really need to link to OpenGL here when building for Emscripten, because that's how it's actually going to render anything in the web. It's using a canvas and using WebGL basically. So I see that I have the lib here specified, but that is probably not needed because you're going to use a Z library from here. Anyway, what did I do next? you need also to specify pthread. I don't know if you really need to specify it, but you need that because of the way I compiled Qt, I think. Because if we go back to the builder for QT6, so when building for Emscripten, that the one, I think I've requested that the threads, multi-thread support should be activated. So that's why it's using this pthread flag. And it's important to keep that in mind because it's going to eventually well, put additional constraints on how you're going to compile anything else that you want to link in your project. So we'll get back to this point shortly. Anyway, in there, so you have to specify that as a compilation flag, pthread, and also you need to link to the library. I'm not sure you need that. Maybe Emscripten is going to specify that directly, but I just added that here anyway. And there is another location, in fact, where you need to specify qthread, but first I was doing everything in this CMake file, sorry, but then I tried to clean a little bit this code and created a few macros. So we now have this setup Emscripten Qt target, and this is defined in CMake macros here. And let's go quickly on that because we get back to it. When you try to set up your target for Qt, yeah, you need to get the Qt link flags, and when you get the link flags for Qt, that's where, yeah, you're also going to specify pthread as a link parameter. So what you also need to take into consideration is that allow memory growth should be disabled when you use Qt with multi-thread support. I've been reading a few pages and blog article on that, and the issue is really that when you have this activated, you're going to allow the application to rebuild the array where you have the memory for it. And on the JavaScript side, you may have views on this array, on the previous version of the array at least, and those views, they're not going to be updated, not that easily at least, so it's going to provide garbage and crash. Or maybe there was a new way now, whenever you do an allocation, it's going to rebuild all the views or something like that, but it's slow or something. Yeah, not recommended anyway. So you can either use multi-thread support or use this memory growth feature. So I just disabled that for now. And also you can specify what is the initial allocation of memory that you want to have for your application. And there is a maximum value anyway. So you may just as well specify that maximum value as initial value. I mean, may still depend on your target, because I've been using a maximum value of 1 GB, which is what I've read for Qt somewhere. So initial memory here is set to 1 GB. But with that setting in place, when I try on my Android phone, the application will download on everything, but it will then refuse to start because it cannot allocate the memory. So if you take this into consideration, maybe it's a better idea to start with less memory than that and be more, well, more careful about what you do with your memory. So I'll try to reduce that eventually. We'll see. And another key element when you try to do this kind of manual building of Qt application in Emscripten is that those libraries here actually do not contain all the symbols that you may need. And even if you're linking with those libraries, you may still have missing symbols, because those symbols are defined on in those additional objects here, which is really weird to me. I've never seen this kind of mechanism, but I've read that, yeah, it's known that in Qt you may not have all the symbols on this platform at least, and you have to resort to things like that. So you link to those objects directly to provide the missing symbols. Next thing is to find where your missing symbols are defined. Don't remember exactly how I found those ones, but you get missing symbols, so you get a name for missing symbols. And what I'm doing then is simply to go into the folder where I have the libraries, so nervproj libraries, emcc QT6 lib. You go there and you just start searching. You search for the symbol that the name of the symbol that is missing, and you search for that symbol name in all the files. So it's going to search that in the archive file here, but it's also going to search that in the object release, and that's where you will eventually find an indication that, okay, it seems that your symbol is defined, I don't know, maybe somewhere like in this object file. And so you know then that you should probably link with this object, and I've been doing that for all those object file one by one. At that point I could then produce an output, in fact, and I was initially requesting Emscripten to generate an HTML file along with the WASM file and the JavaScript file. And yeah, I've tried to put that directly on my web server here. So this was the location where I could place the files. You see that the WASM file is still pretty big because I have not really started to consider any kind of compression, which is something we really need to do anyway. But that was not a concern at start. So you got those files, and you could then try to load this location. Except that if I try it now, it's not going to work. In fact, this actually never really worked. But I don't know. Now it doesn't seem to be producing a real error. But at first I had some errors, I think. Or maybe not, I don't know. So the thing is, for Qt, you can't really rely on the default HTML file generated by Emscripten to load your application. That's not how it's supposed to work. So I've been actually trying to investigate that part. Okay, actually at first it was working, so I don't know, maybe that's because I've changed a lot of stuff in there, and it was apparently complaining about this yeah, reference error, shared array buffer. Okay. So this error was actually a serious one. It took me a significant time to fix. So it's a pity that we can't really use this to demonstrate that, but never mind. So if you start investigating why this is not available, it's because there is some kind of serious security issue with this buffer system. So on the web, you really want to have those cross-origin headers specified correctly now. Otherwise, actually all the browsers, I mean most of them at least, are going to disable this shared array buffer. So what I've done was simply to add those the required headers on my own website for the configuration of my main site, which is this one, nervetech.org. So you need to specify those two headers. Then I restarted my server, but then I got another error because the URL that I was using was untrustworthy. This origin here, http nervetech.org, cannot be trusted. So you need to deliver your response with HTTPS, or you can use localhost as origin, which is interesting because I didn't really consider this part later, but it might be that it could simplify my life significantly. So I was really focusing on using HTTPS instead. So I've added the required setup in my server here again to support SSL, and with a valid certificate for this domain name. And after that, yeah, this shared array buffer exception was gone. But of course I got another error because this file was missing, and that's because when you do the compilation of your Emscripten application executable. So let me find what is done in my case. I have this build folder, release, test, maybe that's one of them. So if you go into the build location, Summit will generate those different files. And at first I was basically just installing those two files because I also had to build this install command manually, and you have that now. It's now significantly more advanced. Well, significantly, it's a bit more advanced. So when you go with installation of when you go with the setup of a Qt target, you're going to try to install JavaScript, a worker JavaScript anyway, and a WASM file also at the same time. But then you may also have some data file, and we do some kind of similar check here when you're building some kind of default target that is not really depending on Qt. The main difference is you are maybe trying to install a default HTML generated by Emscripten in this case, and you probably are not going to try to install a worker JS because this one I don't know where it's coming from exactly. Maybe it's just because we specify pthread, so maybe you could still have very easily a worker JS file generated without using Qt. So this is still to be investigated further, so we'll see. Anyway, when I was finally installing that file also and copying that file on the web server, I got another error. This was an important one also, because if you try to figure out where this Qt container elements is coming from, well, you will have a hard time because it's basically not a symbol or anything. It's really on how you are supposed to distribute those Qt built application for WebAssembly, because if we go into the Qt library folder, where that? It's in the plugins folder, platform, QWASM. Actually, I was already taking this library, so that's going to be, well, what is going to bridge your Qt application with the WebAssembly platform. Basically, this system is quite similar to what you have in the other platform, because I already had, for instance, when I use CLang or MSVC to install this plugin platforms, and we have QWindows, for instance, on Windows. No, don't do that. And same thing on Linux. You have another plugin for your display server, so you need to install that plugin. So this system is similar to what we have there. So that's why I directly took this QWASM library when specifying the libraries to install in the list here. So you have QWASM at the start, but this was really not enough. What you actually really need also are those 3 files here to do the loading process of your application. And do I have an example of those files? Well, I took a copy of those, and then we can maybe... Okay, we have those files here. This is WASM shell file rename, and basically you would have 3 locations here where you have app name by default, and you want to replace that with your application name. The first one here is a title. It's not important. This is for just a display. It's not that critical. But the last one here is going to be the name used to find the GS and the WASM file. So it must be exactly the same name here. That's all you really need to change in that HTML file. Then it's going to start with loading this QLoader GS and also displaying this logo on screen. Where is the logo? Yeah, it's just here. And then where do we load? Okay, it's here. You use this. With that, you create a QLoader with a configuration, and that's where you start loading your actual application WASM file. Then that's why it's not really working with the default HTML file that you can get generated from Emscripten, and you really need to specify those elements manually. So yeah, that's the explanation for this error. I was at this point still using the HTML file generated by Emscripten itself. Took me some time again. I was trying to figure out what the heck is going on, checking those examples, and then I eventually discovered some indication about this QLoader and the Qt container element stuff. So I've been reading those files, and I finally understood, okay, that's what you need to use. So I was changing this app name. As I said, at first I used just this name. Got another error, but that was a stupid error because I was not using the appropriate name for my WASM file and GS file. And then another step further, there was a missing function like this one. I had to search for that in the installation folder for Qt, and in fact we can just go with that here. If I go yeah, I think I was trying to search that just here, and if you search for this instance, it's not going to provide you any library file. It's rather going to point you to those CMake file. And then, of course, I was trying to read those. And if you start reading that, you immediately find stuff like that. I didn't really need I didn't read all those comments, but maybe I should eventually. I just tried to take most of those specification that we have here, and I've tried to integrate them in my own list of link flags here. So we have this create Qt app instance, fetch, big hint, model write, and so on. At first I didn't really know anything about all those parameters. Now I can just tell you already that fetch is ready to enable the Emscripten fetch API. We'll come to this a bit later. Okay, so yes, taking all those elements into consideration, I modified the link flags. Then there was another missing couple of functions like that. You also need to export those functions. This also was found in the CMake files. And finally, there was the initial memory, which you should specify, because otherwise it's going to not work, because default initial memory is too small, and we have disabled the graph of the memory, remember. I don't really remember why I needed this one, but probably there was another error message indicating that you need to specify this. And after that, yeah, it was finally working. I got an empty window displaying on the web. Next step was to try to add some additional content in this window, so building a menu bar and status bar. This is where I have updated the sources that I have available here. So adding a menu bar with some default actions and a status bar. And unfortunately, this didn't work again, just out of the box, because you get those weird display, and this was due to some additional missing object files. Probably it's only this one, and this one I was already adding before, or maybe not. I don't know what this one is actually providing. Anyway, with this correction, you can get the text to display correctly. Then, yeah, I went through preparing an additional library in the Qt, where I'm planning to store everything that can be considered, well, generic or common for Qt applications. Also, I added support to install files in multiple locations. Yes, that's concerning the build process that we have here in NVP config. So we have some kind of same CMake project management system, and we can do installation of some modules. Initially, I was only supporting strings here, but now we also support arrays, which means that you're going to be able to install this file in those two locations. And also a nice update that I made is, if you are specifying folders here, so ending with a slash like this one, it's going to automatically use the same name as the file that you're trying to source here, so you don't have to repeat this name every time, which is cool. So I've done that because I'm not trying to build the CryptoView application as a dedicated application. So I don't want to place that in the same folder where I have the Nerveseed main big application. So we have a dedicated folder for this small application, I guess. Concerning the Linux part, it's still not really updated, so we'll have to do the Linux compilation eventually. We'll see. But the idea would be the same. We need to copy those files in two different folders now. So the change for that was only on the Python code side. Sorry. So this is all in the Nerve project and available to anyone actually. And yeah, I was also trying to build the NV core. I call that light basically in the sources we have NVCore, and before we only had the shared and static version of it, and now we have a third one, which is a light version of it. And in this one we are trying to disable the Lua elements. I think I've already mentioned that, or not. No, maybe not. Oh, I'm probably already using that because if I have Lua, nope. So yeah, maybe not. Anyway, what is this? So the idea was really to remove anything concerning Lua in NVCore, because we are definitely not getting support for Lua in WebAssembly. I could really, if it's really necessary one day, try to compile just Lua itself, but the Lua GIT is out of scope, and Lua itself is going to be really slow actually. So it's not really worth it, I think. Okay, so what next? Yes, this was when I was initially trying to use this library. Afterwards, you may get this kind of error, for instance. And it turned out that because I'm trying to link to this library with in my application where I have Qt, and I have specified that I want multi-thread support in Qt, you in fact need to specify pthread for all your libraries that you are going to link statically. I mean, all the object where you have functions that you're going to use, at least. So in this case, this came from YAML CPP, so I had to rebuild this YAML CPP library for Emscripten, this time specifying this pthread flag. And when you do that, then it's working just fine. You can do the compilation of your full product. And yeah, I just added a helper function in this NVCore library to prepare the load of an icon from a JPEG file. I mean, no, from a PNG file. But before I come further on this point, I decided, okay, I was getting tired of having to compile everything for Emscripten. Then it's going to install everything in my local folder. So in my case, that's this NerveProj, dist, web app, and that could be this folder or CryptoView or whatever. So it would generate those files, and then oops, no, don't do that. Then I had to come here every time and manually try to copy that onto my actual web server. Then I would need to start a Firefox page, type the address. I was actually already creating a bookmark for this location, but you still have to open Firefox, go to that location, and then yeah, you can figure out if it's working or not. So that was taking too long, so I thought, okay, it's time to try to focus on how we can simplify this process and how we can try to serve this web application directly from Python. So I built a simple HTTPS server component in NerveProj where you can serve a directory with HTTP. Then I was starting to investigate how to set this up with SSL. At first I was trying to generate the SSL certificate like that. That actually didn't work. I kind of start to understand how this is really supposed to work. When you want to have an SSL certificate for your website, you absolutely need this certificate to be provided by a certificate authority. So you need to have a chain of certificate. If you already have only one certificate, it's considered to be a self-signed certificate. And even if you put trust in this one, you can't really use it as a trustworthy context, I think, in your web browser. So yeah, what you need to do is basically perform two separate steps. First, you need to generate your certificate authority, and then generate another certificate signed by this authority. And you have to trust this certificate authority, which is what I've done then on this part. Because yeah, when I was trying to use SSL like that and serve that with a server, my application with Python this way, I was back to this unavailable shared array buffer because of different errors indicating that the context could not be trusted. So yes, I've been trying to install a root certificate on Windows, but that was not really working. Then I build my own certificates like that. So the main function to do that is this one. You have two different paths. Either you're building a root certificate here. I still don't really understand all the stuff, but you need to provide some specific extension and so on. Or you're going to generate a non-root certificate, in which case you will be using the actual root certificate itself to build your website certificate, and then you're going to combine those two together to build your final certificate chain. Phew, that's a lot of certificates, isn't it? But in the end, yeah, to do the generation, we need only two simple steps. This one and the other call here. That was still not working through, because then I realized that you also need some additional stuff apparently concerning those subject alternative names that was not in my initial version for those template files. These are also in nerfproj, by the way. So if we go in nerfproj, we have the list of assets, templates, and you have a lot of stuff here. And you have SSL root and SSL client. And these files are actually coming from my initial test with a Lua sec. So I have a doc folder here with Lua sec, and here it's indicating how you're supposed to generate those root and client certificates, and you also have those CNF file. So I took one of those files, and now the name is changed depending on what is your common name that you want for your certificate. So this is done dynamically, but apart from that, the content was the same as what we have here. So yeah, this initial version of it mean for the client part, apparently. Yeah, that's the client part. I had to add this part in the name. And even with that, still no shared array buffer, but this was because of another stupid error. My Python server was actually not really sending my headers, so of course it was not considered to be trusted. But after fixing that, I could finally start everything in Python, which is great, because now I can do something like that. In fact, let's say I go back on my test application. I mean, I'm not really using the test application anymore, because I have also added additional scripts now. This one, for instance, serve CryptoView. So we're just going to use a default environment and call this HTTPS server, and we're going to serve this location, the this web app CryptoView, which is exactly where all my files are installed when I build with CMake. And yeah, this is another annoying issue, but I had to specify the path where is Firefox if I want to use this to start the web application. But anyway, if I try, for instance, to update anything in CryptoView, what would I do? Let's say instead of got response, I'm going to say got price response. I save that. Then I just need to build everything. So MVP build, and I'm targeting EMCC. Yeah, it's the opposite, sorry. So yeah, it's going to give you a list of the asset files that will be integrated in one of those Emscripten application. And then I'm going to build that. It's a bit slow, globally speaking, I would say. I don't know if this is really normal or not. I mean, I'm using, I don't know, maybe 03 optimization, or is that 02? If it's 03, maybe I should downgrade that to 02. No, seems to be 02. 03 for the default. Yeah. Anyway, so I've built the application, and now I can just do MVP NVL serve CryptoView. And now I'm tapping that, but normally I just do up and down, and you click there. That's it. Oh, come on. Serve. And boom, you have it started. That's the size I was using last, so it's still on this size. You have your server running in the background. We are in HTTPS mode, and we have everything ready here. And yeah, you can just quickly get your feedback when you're testing anything. I feel that it's pretty handy this way. Also, the nice feature is whenever I'm closing that, it's also going to stop the server in the background. So I don't have to come here and try to kill that server or anything, which is also very handy. So this part took me quite a lot of time, but no, I think it's really cool to have this. I don't really know how people are doing to build web application and test that, but this mechanism seems like something I would like to use on a regular basis at least. Now, one thing I am considering. Remember all this mess I said concerning the up to the end here. I was generating a certificate, sending all this, only to realize that my headers were not really sent properly. So I'm thinking now, maybe I don't even need SSL at all, and I can just serve the same thing if I use localhost, which should be trusted according to the error message that was reported initially. Where was that again? Here, you can also use localhost. So, what does it mean? Let's try to do that actually. We'll go back into Postland MVP. local HTTPS server, and yeah, when building the first we are preparing by default a localhost HTTP server, and then we're setting up the SSL layer. Let's just say we don't set up this SSL layer, so we are actually just in HTTP right now. If ported that, then you don't display that. I mean, the port is going to be, what am I going to use? 444. So let's pretend I don't change that for now. And otherwise, we're just going to use maybe HTTP localhost and serve your index file. Okay. So, would this work? Come on. Okay, so working just fine, which means, I mean, this is just HTTP, right? I mean, it's, yeah, you don't have HTTPS or whatever. So that would work also, basically. And all the stuff I've done concerning SSL certificate generation and where am I? I'm a bit too high. Yeah, SSL certificate generation and usage also certificate to serve your content through HTTPS. Well, you don't really need that. The key is really to ensure that those two headers are set up properly, and then you can use localhost. But anyway, I kind of like the HTTPS I will not work in another computer because I had to add this entry, this domain name in my host list on Windows, so it's not going to work anywhere else. So maybe it's better to keep it this way. We'll see. For now, let's just say we copy that and I revert to changes. We also work here. I may need to get back to this eventually. So my initial test then was really to check if I needed to use this 443 port, which was not needed, and then I was trying to disable SSL, which was not working, but because at that point I was already using this nerftech point local domain name. But if I had been trying with just localhost, then yeah, that should have worked at that point. Okay, what I've done next, which I already mentioned before, is adding support to automatically start the browser, monitor the state of this browser, because we're executing a command, and when we're done with this command, we also shut down the server itself. And then what? Then I was trying to simply add icons, PNG icons in the WebAssembly application, and yeah, in fact you can see that already in there. If we go, what? Okay, I guess it was downloading something. If you go in the file menu, you have this icon displayed, and if I click on that, I get the event triggered. That's because I have at the beginning, where is it? Oh, build menu bar. I have this create icon function called, and I am attaching an event handler also to this button. So this is working just fine. And what else? So added support for icon, also then added support to display a console panel. The idea with the console panel was really to try to redirect all the outputs that I have. I've shown that already. So for now, for instance, the message that we see, I mean, all the messages that we see here are actually just regular log outputs. So they're coming from the application when I try to log something out. And if we go at the end of the main window initialization, that's where we're going to perform a request, and we have those log messages again. Okay, let's get a bit faster on this. We don't want to go into too much details. This part was actually pretty straightforward to set up anyway. I just had to specify a new class, a new console log sync, which is a different implementation of my log sync base class. And then this would be assigned to the log manager, and it would also receive all the output messages. So we could then display that in the console panel. Then I was trying to send that request for the Bitcoin price, and again I got another shared memory issue with the libcurl libraries this time. So I tried to rebuild libcurl with the updated C++ and C flag also, including pthread, and this worked. I could then build the library and then link to that library properly. But that was in fact still not working when I was running the application, because I got different errors like syscall socket blah 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 not available. And if you read about that, you will eventually realize that, yeah, that's perfectly normal, because in Emscripten you don't really have access to sockets, so you can be using sockets when you are on the web. You have WebSockets, but that's something different, and that's why when you use Emscripten, you're supposed to use what they provided as the fetch API, which is basically providing you with an implementation of HTTP GET PUT post request. That's fairly simple actually, and pretty similar to what we can already do with libcurl anyway. So I thought, okay, maybe it's time to try to be a bit more specific in my implementation and try to embed support for Emscripten fetch in NV core. So that's the part where I try to refactor my request and request manager classes. Now it's looking a bit tricky, in fact, because if we go in the sources for NV core sources, so I mean most of it is happening in requests. And in requests, I have basically decided to go on two separate paths. Either we are Emscripten and we include fetch, and otherwise we include curl. You have a few common elements. I mean, though you really have nothing common. You start immediately with the libcurl implementation with a big if not def. This is everything concerning libcurl, though that was from the previous implementation. And then otherwise you go with the Emscripten fetch implementation. So you basically re-implement all the functions that you need, and you do things differently. Another key thing to keep in mind here is that fetch will by default provide you with asynchronous ending of your results, whereas with libcurl I was by default handling synchronous results. So you have ways anyway to ask the fetch API to provide a synchronous result. I have just not implemented that yet, and you need to, well, to deal with some specific I don't know, I'll read that somewhere in there. You have a flag to specify, a link flag to specify on I don't remember what this was. Anyway, this will come later. And for the async implementation of libcurl, for now, I'm just basically ending that with a synchronous call. So if we are performing async, you have your handler specified here, but you're just going to get your response and apply your handler on your response synchronously. Not so good, so I need to investigate one day how to perform real asynchronous requests with libcurl, but not really critical for the moment. Also, the interface of the request object itself was a bit changed. I mean, if you don't have Emscripten, you don't have those two functions, but probably I should remove them even from the curl implementation, because it doesn't really make sense anymore. We now have those request response, so no reason why you would store that in the request itself anymore. And apart from that, request response is yeah, not changed from the interface perspective. And from the implementation side, we just have different result code to return, but it's not really so big deal. So after that, I could then, when I build Emscripten version, simply not link at all with libcurl. So when I'm building this light version, which is what I'm using in fact for Emscripten, you're going to link with a few different libraries. I'm still linking. Oh, I could have removed that, I think. Oh, I mean light. Light is only defined for Emscripten, right? I know it's defined for all of them. Why is that? Oh yes, I know. It's because the initial idea was to remove Lua, and I wanted to use this same library when I built the desktop version of CryptoView. Because when I go now on CryptoView here, we have this CryptoView application, which is also running as a desktop version, as you can see here. It's exactly the same thing as the Emscripten version, by the way. But now we also don't have Lua, any dependency on Lua here, which is, well, I mean, consistent with the Emscripten version anyway. So yeah, this light library can be built with CLang or MSVC. So you may still need access to the curl libraries in this case, but probably If I'm here with Emscripten, I could just remove that now. I will check that eventually. Or I could just check that right now. If I try to how could I do that properly? So set or the opposite maybe. So by default we have no additional libraries, and if we're not on Emscripten we will have libcurl as additional libraries. So right now there is no curl library anymore when building with MCC. Ten years later, it's really slow. That's strange. Okay, so let's try that. This also is pretty slow for something that is local. That's weird. But anyway, still working fine. We have the icons, so we're good. Oh, by the way, this is a dock widget. It means that you can take this. It's not displaying, unfortunately, while you are dragging, but you can still drag that and stack that somewhere else. I was trying initially to make this window visible as a float, but I didn't find an appropriate way to make this work with Emscripten. It's working fine. I guess I can use here. If I use NVP CryptoView, it's going to run the desktop version of it, but that's the same application. And if I'll try to drag this, I can display the window while I'm dragging it, or I could even just keep that outside and it would still work. But this double window display, that's apparently not really working, or at least I have not found how to make this work yet. Anyway, that's cool. What else do we have to cover? So requesting the price, that's how, as I said, I figured out that I could not use libcurl, so trying to implement the support with the fetch API, and now performing an async request, and then you could finally get your price reported. So this is basically where I am with this the end of this devlog session. And yes, what I'm planning to do next is really to start investigating a bit further in the direction of WebGPU, because I really want to go into a 3D environment in there. So what I would like to do would be to integrate a WebGPU window into this QT application. Problem is, unfortunately, I have not found an existing example of how to do that. and WebGPU is still pretty new, so I might have a few issues on this path, but I need to start on that and try to investigate how to do it. Also, I have already found that you can use WebGPU to build your native application too, which is cool because it means I could use the same library then to build the desktop version of my application and the web assembly version of it. So this will be for the next devlog, and meanwhile, yeah, happy coding everyone, and thanks for yeah, for making it up to this point in this video. It was pretty long, 1 hour already. So yeah, see you next time maybe. Bye bye.